I definitely think it's detrimental to survivors because it makes them not want to speak out or report. And it leaves us feeling like this is our fault. This is something we did.
Survivor Tribe sat down with 4 survivors of sexual trauma.
Hi, I'm Candace, and I'm a survivor.
Hi, I'm Dana, and I'm a survivor.
Hi, I'm Victoria, and I'm a survivor.
Hi, I'm Tair, and I'm a survivor.
To have an in-depth conversation about rape apology.
And so add in comments from people that we thought we could trust or people that we see in the media or on the news, backing up that notion that it's somehow not the person who did it's fault, then that just compounds the fact that it's even harder to navigate through this healing process.
Here is what they had to say.
Definitely seen a lot on the news and the media recently, especially with the Me Too movement and so many more people coming forward about rape or abuse. And lots of times the women get blamed for it, especially if they've taken a long time to come forward. And if it's perhaps someone that they worked with and they continue working with them, especially like with Harvey Weinstein and all the actresses, questions about why did these people choose to continue working with the person, or, so it's a lot of victim blaming. And recently now in our news in New York, the governor has been accused by 3 different people of sexual harassment, and him just saying, oh, I'm just a funny guy, they were jokes. And it's a lot of not really taking the women seriously, like with the not the latest, but the second to latest Supreme Court nominee in that trial. Just saw a lot of folks making excuses and not believing the women. And it's just become so more prevalent now with the Me Too movement. And it's really disappointing to see the way women or men are treated when they talk about abuse.
Kind of piggybacking off of what Candace just said, it's always fascinated me. That's the word I want to use because it's not funny in the slightest. What's always kind of interested me in the way our media and our culture addresses rape and sexual violence is that unless it's in this very cookie cutter, narrow view, like you got raped at knife point, or like it was a stranger in a dark alley, or some dude in a ski mask, pick any of those like stereotypes about like sexual violence as you will. I think as long as like that's where I've seen the most apologies, quote unquote, for being raped, because if it doesn't, I'll probably get into this later on too. Like my story is for sure not cute. It's messy and it's gross and muddy. So I think with the media, especially like Harvey Weinstein and these men in power, where people are shocked, they're like, but why didn't you say no? And they're like, do you know who that dude is? And I think that's where it's always really interesting to me to see, like, unless it fits this really cookie cutter narrow vision, which frankly, I've never met a survivor whose story fits that mold. That's where everyone's like, oh, but they didn't mean it. Like take Brock Turner from Stanford, like the guy assaulted a passed out woman behind a dumpster and she was blamed like, well, why did you have so much to drink? Like, why? We're like, dumpster. So I think it's just, we always find a way in the media to blame the survivor and let the perpetrator off and say like, oh, it was a misunderstanding. And I'm sure we all have plenty of examples from the media, and I'm sure I obviously can't speak for all y'all, but I know it's hard to watch when it's invalidating. Like, it's just, at least for me, I was like, it's just invalidating. So.
Yeah, I was watching 8 out of 10 Cats. I don't know if you have that in America. I don't know if it's a British thing or what, but it's like a comedy panel show. And they were talking about the Jimmy Savile case. Obvious go here. And like the way like one of the comedians was talking about it, like it wasn't like a funny conversation, it was an actual genuine conversation. And like the people who, like when it came out in the media, it's like how they reacted to it, it was kind of like, well, yeah, we kind of already knew this. And it's almost like powerful people who do these things get away with it because people know about it, but no one really has the power to do anything about it. So it's like when it comes out, it's not really a surprise to anyone important, but to everyone else, it's like, whoa, this is going on this whole time. Like why? Like, why didn't you do something about it? And it's like money, isn't it? Or power, or one of these things that are apparently so much more important than keeping people safe, and children and women and everyone safe from trauma and awful things. So yeah, it's hidden. It's either a really dramatic thing or it's not talked about until it's too late, I feel, in the media.
I don't know how about you, but here in Israel, we had in the last couple of months, some really harsh, really bad comments, especially about celebrities who have raped or abused, especially minors. And the comments that I hear most is that are that she was asking for it, or by the way she acted around that celebrity, or what did she wear. I mean, I think this is like number one. What did she wear? And she was, old enough to make that decision. But I don't know, for me, it's like, don't you understand the concept of power? I mean, abuse and rape isn't sexual. It's all about power and violence. So that's it for me. And I think one of the main things about apologies in the media is that some rape and abuse are being compared, and this is highly invalidating. So these are the main comments that I've seen in media and news.
So my abuse happened between the ages of 5 and 15. And I just recently had this memory of me being 12 or 13 and my mom calling me a slut. And at the time, like, I don't know what my mom knew about what was going on. I never thought she knew anything, but that memory like really made me think about, like, did she know, and was she blaming me? Like, it was something that I did to cause this, even though it was like multiple people over the years. So that was definitely a very, very hard thing to hear, knowing that like I'd had no sexual experience outside of the abuse. And then also when my parents like officially found out about my abuse when I was 19, and one of the people that abused me was my older brother. And I just remember my mom like constantly telling me, okay, he's your brother, you have to forgive him. Now it's not his fault, he has issues or whatever. So like really putting that blame on me, it felt like, and forcing me to forgive someone that I didn't want to, or didn't even like ask for forgiveness or acknowledge that they'd done something. Those are like the two big examples I can think of where, it's really hit me in a way where something that I did and not something that was done to me.
I've often found that disclosing to family is often the hardest, largely because, at least with my family, they're very protective and they were like want to fix everything, but they're also like, what do I deal with this like it's like hard to wrap your brain around it if you haven't been through it, at least in my experience. And what comes to mind for me in terms of people apologizing for abuse or rape, I actually got molested by a county elected sheriff when I was 10. Yeah. And of course, this dude's public elected official, like, I'm at a county fair getting fingerprinted in case like I get kidnapped, And I remember telling my mom after it happened, and I think compounded with the fact that it was like she was the one who brought me there, because like she was like, just in case, because like we had gone through some stuff, like some scares like earlier. And so she's apologized for this since, but at the time she was like, are you sure? Like, the people elected him. He couldn't do that. You must have misunderstood. And then, of course, I didn't disclose to anybody else until much later on, because I was still really confused about the whole thing. And then when I got raped, the last time I got raped, ironically, I was kidnapped and drugged at the same time too. And the dude worked at SpaceX. He worked like as like a rocket engineer, and was like an army contractor in Iraq, great credentials, looks great on paper. And so now I was trying to walk through it, and I was like talking to a friend of mine before I tried to report. My friend was like, but homeboy went to Iraq. Soldiers don't do that. I'm like, well, technically he wasn't a soldier. He was a contractor. And they're like, but he works on rockets. And there was, like we mentioned earlier, it was all these things where they're trying to find what I did wrong. They're trying to find out where I messed up instead of saying like, wait, he did what? And so I realized kind of in my nuanced history with this kind of stuff, the more quote unquote likable or powerful the perpetrator is, or could be male, female, somewhere in between. Or not in between, but the more likable or presentable they are, the harder it is for people to comprehend that even magnetic people are capable of doing really horrible things that are traumatizing for long after the fact. And so those are kind of probably the two big ones, because the dudes were people in power and people who were on paper look perfect, but they weren't. So super fun and exciting.
Yeah. My mine's slightly different. Obviously mine happened 6 months ago, and it was my best friend. I just moved to uni, and I lived with him, and I didn't realize that how manipulative and emotionally abusive he was. So the main problem that I had was me believing me. So like I like, as soon as it happened, I felt odd, obviously. So I messaged my friend, and they were like, yeah, Vicky, love, that, like, that's not okay. So my sister, because I was like at uni, so I was far from home, but my sister lived about 2 hours away. So I was like, sis, can I come stay with you? And she was like, why? And I kind of told her what happened and what had been happening, because I'd lived with him for about 2 months and got spat on, sneezed on. He peed on my floor and made me clean it up and all like things like this. But at the same time, he was my best friend. Like, we watched movies together. Like, he helped me grieve the death of my uncle who died because of COVID. He stopped me cutting myself. He told me that like the knife wasn't my security blanket, he was. So not only was he my reason for cutting, but my reason for not cutting. So I was very confused, and like, how could this person have done this to me? He's my best friend, he's great. So I had my sister calling the police to get him arrested. I had my family like why don't you understand? Like, this is what he's done. And I'm just like, yeah, but he's my best friend, he couldn't do that. So I ended up protecting him. Like, I defended him constantly to everyone, which isolated me. So like, all the things that people have been saying that other people said to them, I said to myself. Like, I was the one who wouldn't believe me that it happened. And even now I struggle. Like, I have a blog, and like every other like entry, it's just like, yeah, but I miss him, he was my best friend. But like we had so much fun. Like, we watched Doctor Who together, which is my favorite show. How could someone who watched my favorite show with me then literally rape me the same night? Like, so yeah, like yeah. I mean, I'm very lucky and appreciative of the fact that my family was supportive, but the fact that I got in my own way means that he is now walking around my university. And in 4 weeks, when I get to go back, like, I'm really excited to see my new boyfriend, who thankfully is so much better. But I also am terrified to walk around campus alone in case he's there, because I got in my own way, because I wouldn't believe myself that he could do that.
So my story is kind of similar to yours, Victoria. My best friend used to be my best friend, was abusing me. So I truly understand everything you said. For me, it's also internal validation that I struggle with the most. Like, as you said, he's my best friend, and I knew what kind of relationship it was. It was friends with benefits. I was, inverted commas, like, knew what I was going into, but not like that. And for me, also, part of my journey is to realize that every time consent needs to be asked. And also for me is like, but he was drunk, or these sorts of things. I'm sorry, a little bit overwhelmed. So yeah, I truly understand what it's like, defending him, ironically, like, but it was, I mean, he's a straight A student. He's such a good boy. He's the best friend of everyone's, and he's such a good boy. He would never do such a thing. I mean, and you seem to be such a good friend. So, I mean, nothing is wrong, right? So, yeah.
I definitely think it's detrimental to survivors because it makes them not want to speak out or report, and it leaves us feeling like this is our fault, this is something we did, or we're misunderstanding the situation. And then I think it gives like rapists or abusers more power if they see that, you know, everyone is not, or like not chastising them and making excuses and apologies for it. Then it gives them more power than us, and it really affects people who've been abused, raped, sexually assaulted in any way feel powerless. And it doesn't matter if we come forward because the person is not, they're going to get away with it. So it doesn't matter. So I think it's really, really harmful to survivors.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly detrimental and invalidating, because even trying to share your story with others, like, you never know if it's going to be somebody who understands, or they look at you with that look where they're like, which is almost like more harmful than them not saying anything at all. And so I think that's because sexual violence, at least for me, is so confusing, and we're so indoctrinated by the media and culture and our peers and other things, that the survivor must have done something wrong. That's so ingrained into our every fiber of our being. So it's hard. And so add in comments from people that we thought we could trust, or people that we see in the media or on the news, kind of backing up that notion that it's somehow not the person who did it's fault, then that just compounds the fact that it's even harder to navigate through this healing process. So I think people who make those kinds of excuses for people who do this kind of harm to others, it's just hard. And healing is gross. And which is, I want to fire off 8 F-bombs, but I can't do that today. So it's, I think all these stereotypes and all these apologies from the media saying but I'm no, but they still did this. That doesn't excuse, I'm sorry, they had a crappy childhood. I'm sorry, but that doesn't excuse it. So I don't know. I think it's also just dangerous too. I think it's just a really dangerous narrative to keep perpetrating for a variety of reasons.
Yeah. I think one of the things I think that makes it worse is that people don't always believe you. But when that's paired with the fact that you probably won't get a successful case in court to the point there's no point going through with it, that makes it so much worse. I couldn't get forensic evidence done because I'd had consensual sex the night before. So there was literally no point, even if I wanted to. Honestly, I've considered sending him to be locked up for as long as possible now, but I know there's no point because there's no evidence. So I don't need to repeat trauma to then see him again, considering the last time I saw him, he was running away from me because he legally couldn't be around me. The last time I saw my best friend, he had to sprint as fast as he could away from me. So I don't need to repeat that trauma just to not get any more justice, to be more angry at the world that nothing is being done about this. So thankfully, my family believe me, and my friends are really supportive because they've been through the same thing. But I don't need a court telling me, confirming my greatest fears that I'm the one in the wrong, or that it isn't as bad as it seems, that I haven't had nightmares for 6 months for no reason. I don't need to be told that, but I do deserve justice. So other people not believing you, paired with the lack of ability for us to get justice, just makes this whole situation so much worse, which just makes me feel more powerless and more voiceless. So things like this, which are really great and I'm very grateful for, means that we can share our story and we have to create our own community where we know that we're safe and believed, because the world just seems so much darker now than it did 6 months ago.
For me, it's super harmful, especially when oneself struggles with believing its own story. I had so many years, debating with myself whether it was my fault, whether was it even wrong, what happened to me. And when I wanted to open up, I've never told my family, but I told some of my friends. And some of them believed me and some of them didn't. And some of the comments that I personally heard was, but this is the kind of relationship that you had with him. And I mean, you wanted it. And I wanted to come up to one of my best friends. And I told him after another another friend touched me when I didn't want to, and it was wrong. And I was so terrified. I mean, it was a mutual friend, and I was so terrified he's gonna say it, but it was drunk and you were flirting or something like that, and that he wouldn't believe me. Eventually, he did, but I was so surprised, and I think that the fact that I was so surprised says a lot about our, community, and the fact that as a society, I mean, as you all said, tend to, victim blaming and trying to find what the victim did that was wrong and not the abuser or rapist or predator. And so the comments that I've personally had is that it was only that, or it didn't, or that's it, or at least it wasn't that worse, or things like that. So yeah.
True, definitely true. No, I feel like it's been since so long ago since my abuse, and like still the messages that I got when my family found out like stick with me all these years later. Guy 9 years ago, my mom passed away, and my dad like couldn't really live alone, so my wife and I and our son moved in to my dad's apartment with him. And a couple years later, like my dad got really sick and needed help being taken care of. And he wanted my brother to come help. And so I'd come home from work and my brother would be like sitting on my couch watching TV or just in the kitchen doing things. And it just felt re-traumatizing again. And then when my wife saw how upset I was about it and spoke to my dad and told him, he can't come over here. He can't, like my dad at one point wanted him to like come stay and like move in so he can take care of him. And my wife said, no, like that can't happen. It's not okay. Like makes Candace very uncomfortable. And my dad's response, it was like not his response to her, but on the phone later, I heard him talking to someone and saying that, he doesn't even know what the big deal was. This happened such a long time ago. Like, why hasn't she forgotten about this or moved on from this? And like, even though it's been so long, like those words or words like that, my mom telling me that, I have to forgive him or forgive all the people because their family has really made me feel really badly about myself and like thinking, are they right? Like, should I be over this by now? Should I just like be able to let this go and not let it continue to be such a big part of my life? So like that's a doubt I'm constantly struggling with. And like even now, like, I'm not sure where my brother lives now, but every time I'm on the street, I see someone like with his body shape, I think that it's him. And like I get really scared and freeze. And if I'm with my daughter and I see someone who I think it's him, like I like push her away behind me to hide her. So it's definitely played a big part in how I'm able to move on and move through this. It's definitely affected my journey greatly.
I think so. For me, this is incredibly true. It's just really true. And as much as I would love to be on this panel and say, "Oh yeah, that's never bothered me," like water off my back, I'd be lying. Like, and it's kind of taught me over the years and with my experiences, because there's been like more than one from different perpetrators. It used to make like I've noticed my feeling around it has shifted where now, even though it still blows my mind that people look at me and say like, but you don't look like a girl, like somebody who's been raped. And I'm like, the F is that supposed to mean? Like, just because I'm not like actively sitting like on the train like crying. I did that this morning. Like, what you talking about? So I think it's what people who apologize for this kind of violence, what it's taught me is that this healing journey is never going to end. Like, it's never going to end. And it's disheartening because there's a part of me that says, like, oh, you should be over it. Like, you've been to counseling, you've done this, that, and the other, you're on medication. Like, there's all these shoulds going on around my brain with this kind of stuff. And I have to kind of talk myself down. I'm like, no, okay, like breathing exercise time, Dana. Like, so it's just hard. And for me at least, I can't speak for anybody else, but I would be lying if I said this was anything but true and a pillar of my journey, because I'm a people pleaser. I want everybody to like me because I'm fantastic. But it's just hard. It's just really, really hard and gross.
Since I'm the problem, I obviously have to say true. I shouldn't say I'm the problem. But since I feel like I'm the one who's getting in my way, it is definitely true. Especially when everyone else around me is really supportive. It almost annoys me. Like, yeah, but what about this? What about that? And it just makes me feel more isolated. Like I'm doing this all by myself because I'm defending someone who's now basically a stranger to me. Like the people in my life are so amazing. Like my new guy, honestly, I love him so much. He's the most amazing person I've ever met. Like if Hugh Jackman was a normal person, like this is the next best thing. But like then every night I'm still haunted and I'm like, it doesn't make any sense. Why you like, was it even that big of a deal? Like it was one night, like he was your best friend. Like if you'd stayed, then maybe it would have just worked out. And I'm constantly conflicting myself. Like, yeah, he was right, but then the next morning I'll wake up and I'm like, yeah, but you were bruised for like 2 months straight. Like he started to slap you randomly. Like you were talking to the police with a massive bruise here, and they were like, yeah, I'm not believing you here, darling. And it's like, okay, cool. And then the next morning I wake up and I'm like, okay, he's evil, he's the worst person ever, he's the devil. And then the next morning, and it's never ending and completely exhausting. And I'd like to think that since it's only been like I say only, it's only been 6 months, that hey, it'll get better. And then I see my best friend who like this happened to like 3 years ago, and they still struggle with it often. And it's hard to see it happening to other people, because as I go through this journey of healing and as I live the rest of my life knowing that I was raped, how are other people going to respond to it? Like, is someone else going to be like, okay, she's weak, let's try it again, like maybe she can't fight me off since she didn't fight me off last time, or maybe I won't be believed and I'll lose friends again? Because if it wasn't like the only friend I had, I honestly don't think I would have survived. And that thought to me is terrifying. And I never want to be in that position again. So constantly doubting myself and constantly not believing myself and putting myself in the cycle of and end up reliving it all the time just to believe myself. Like it's not helping. And I'm scared to lose my friends again over it. So the constant fear of everything, it doesn't help, which sucks.
For me, definitely true. I don't usually tell my story to many people, but some of my really close friends know about me and my story. And it took me a lot of time to open up. And I remember that I was with some of my friends at work. I say it can be work. And in a sense, sort of an outburst, because it's like I was so furious and overwhelmed. And I just said, what do you know about my life? What do you know about my struggles? That I've been abused and raped for so long. And what do you know about my daily struggles? And I saw the look on their faces, and they didn't believe me. And I talked with one of them, I think it was like a couple of months afterwards. And I told him the whole story. And he told me that he thought I was just exaggerating and overreacting and or something like that. And the fact that I know that I wasn't believed and that I was just making a fuss out of nothing really, really hurt me, because I just thought, I mean, it brought me back to the point where, again, I can't believe myself. I can't believe that what I went through is wrong, and I keep contemplating whether it was my fault, or was it, am I just making things up or not. And I think this is the most harmful thing as a survivor. Again, as a continuation to Victoria, truly believing our story and knowing all the facts. And for me, I heard so many stories on the media mostly, and I just can't escape the thought that I just make things up, that my story wasn't that bad. I mean, comparing, which is not true. I know that now, but some I still have those dark times when I still can't believe myself, and I just talk to my boyfriend, and he reassures me that my experiences, so to speak, were truly hopeful. So yeah.
I would say to not doubt yourself, to believe yourself, to keep talking about it until you find someone that believes you, to not be so hard on yourself, to be gentle and take care of yourself however you need to, and not to compare your story with anyone else's. Everyone's struggle or experience is different, but doesn't make it any harder if yours seems not as bad. So just keep fighting and talking, and don't let yourself be silenced by folks who make apologies for the perpetrators.
For me, I would probably say something along the lines of, even in the darkest of valleys and even in the darkest of moments, your story is important. It's valid. No matter how messy or disgusting or confusing it is, it's valid. It happened. Your brain is being an idiot and making you believe these internalized indoctrines. You are powerful beyond measure, and you're going to get through it. People are idiots. That says more about them than you. And there are going to be moments where you believe them. I still do too. But there are going to be moments where you hear this little voice inside you that says, no, they're wrong. It's going to be real quiet at first. Listen to it. It's going to be there. It's going to be a whisper. But soon, once you start listening to that little voice saying, no, I'm valid. What I went through was real. Hold on to that voice, shout it from the rooftops, and find your people. It's going to take a minute, but you are beyond measure, and there are people who believe you. And I'll punch anybody who doesn't. So there's that. So that's probably something along those lines.
You've just sat and watched three very incredible, beautiful, amazing women who I've grown massive respect for. I think you're amazing. And myself share our stories. You're not alone. Like, the first thing I did was I went to Instagram. I made my own Survivor account, and I followed every other Survivor account out there, because there is far too many. There's an atrocious amount of survivors out there. It's heartbreaking to see, but you're not alone. Any one of us with an Instagram account will talk to you. If you feel like you're going insane because this can't possibly be true, talk to one of us. No one who has an account is ever going to turn anyone away who needs help. I wouldn't. In fact, I encourage as many people to talk to me as they can, because I know my encounter with survivors has helped my process. I'm sure anyone here would love to talk to you and help you on this journey, because you shouldn't have gone through this, and it's not fair that you did. And if you're angry and if you want to beat up your pillow, go for it. Don't beat up actual people, but anything inanimate that doesn't hurt you is a great idea. I've abused my life-size penguin a lot. So yeah, trust yourself, because your body knows your experiences better than your mind. You went through what you went through, and I'm so sorry that you're watching this, and I'm sorry that everyone here is speaking on this, but you don't have to do it alone. You have a group of people who will believe you no matter who doesn't. So please talk to someone, because there are people who will believe you.
I think first, you are worthy of being heard, and your story is valid no matter what. It doesn't matter if you follow it to the cold, harsh definition of rape or abuse as defined in the laws or whatever. The fact that you felt uncomfortable in any way makes it wrong, and you shouldn't have gone through this, but you have. And I'm sorry for that, but I assure you that each one of us believe you. And there are going to be people in your life that are going to believe you. And to be honest, you are not obligated to say anything unless you're comfortable of saying anything. It can take years and decades until you say anything, but believe me, you're going to be heard if you want to, and you're going to be helped and listened to and believed. I know it may be hard. It is going to be hard, and there are going to be people who won't believe you, and I'm sorry. And I'm sorry, I know how hard it is, and I know that it is a constant fight, internal fight. And to be honest, I don't know if it's ever gonna pass, but you're gonna have a support net. You're gonna have people in your life that will believe you and will support you and hold your hand and will listen every story and please keep telling your story, even when you feel like you're talking too much. You're talking about it too much. This is all that you can think about it. This is all that you can talk about it. And that's okay, because you have been damaged. And I'm sorry. And this is a major, major experience and trauma in your life. And it should be heard and talked about.